All right, looks like we're ready to go for another edition of Professor Cardworthy. And good morning to you. However, I hope everything's going real well with you. I'm Professor Cardworthy again, money trainer. We look at all things financial here. We have a lot of focus on consumer, personal finance areas. I've been in the business for 30 years following the payments area primarily in banking. And I've been able to do it from both the professional side or the business side as well as consumers. So it's kind of a very unusual situation to be in, but I've been able to do it for a number of times. We've helped really millions of consumers save money on their financial products. And at the same time, we have helped banks become more competitive with one another. And if you watch some of the other episodes, you'll understand a little more about what we're doing. But we try to cover all things financial, everything, investing, borrowing, savings, all of that. So anyway, we're going to get right to today's lesson, and you're going to really enjoy this one. Today's lesson is called the Overdrawn Billionaire. Now what the heck? Well, it's all here on this piece of paper that I have. I received a notice from the bank, it's about 2 years ago, and it was informing me that I was being charged a $35 fee. And what had happened is there was a $40 payment that was presented to the account. It had insufficient funds, so they returned it as unpaid, and they charged me with, that it was unpaid, it was returned, and they charged me the nuisance fee of the $35. Well, it was my mistake. I forgot to switch an automatic payment from their bank to another bank, and so they got me. So I'm looking at it, and then all of a sudden, I look down and here's the available balance of $9,854,241,363.69. It's all right there. And it says it twice on there. So I had to get out my little trusty magnifying glass and check this thing out some more. I mean, I'm looking at it all different ways. And sure enough, that's what it says. And I pull the whiteboard over here. Let's just take a look at that. I hope you can see that. Look, $9,854,241,363.69. What? You know, what do you do? I mean, what's your first inclination? I mean, probably, well, it might be to pick up the bank and check it out, but I didn't. I went and got me a beer and sat down. And I just started thinking about it a little bit. And first off, I mean, just to grasp the magnitude of that kind of money. I mean, if you earned 1% interest on that money, that's $100 million a year you would generate. $8 billion a month comes out to $300,000 a day just for having this kind of dough. That's like winning the Powerball when it gets over $1 billion, which doesn't happen very often. It's like winning it 9 times. I mean, this is an incredible thing. So I'm sitting there, you know, sipping my beer and wondering, well, then how could this even possibly happen? It had to be a mistake. I mean, maybe there was some Saudi prince somewhere that maybe mistakenly deposited money in my account, or maybe I had done somebody a favor and they're rewarding me. Well, or maybe it was some fan that I had run across that bequeathed all their cash assets. I had absolutely no idea. So after you kind of get through that phase, then I go, well, what would you do with $9 billion, Robert? You know, what would you do with it? So I thought about a couple of things. Number one, I always wanted to buy an NFL team. And sure enough, the Carolina Panthers happened to be for sale at that time. And in fact, let me step over here. I'll show you a picture since I don't know how to edit this kind of stuff. There's a picture of me buying the Carolina Panthers for $2.3 billion, a check made out to Jerry Richardson, who was the owner of the team. It actually was for sale when I got this, and the bids were running around 2.2 billion. I don't know what it ended up, but I had a $2.3 billion check ready to go. That would have been absolutely awesome. But anyway, the thing is, I thought about that, always wanted to own a Lamborghini. They're the coolest cars, I thought. And that was right off the top. The Lamborghini, a catamaran. Where I live here in Florida, I'm not far from Charlotte Harbor, which is actually one of the nicest harbors in the entire United States for sailing. And a catamaran is a sailing catamaran. It's about $1 million, pocket change. How about a private jet? A Gulfstream G650. That's like the biggest one out there. I believe it hauls 12 to 18 people anywhere in the world. It's about 60, 80 million. Again, drop in the bucket, the $9.9 billion. How about a nice big mansion down in Naples? They got them down there, $30, $40 million easy. And then I had owned a piece of property up in the mountains that was a lodge for the family, and I always wanted to own a bigger ranch. Something that has mountain ground and so forth. So that would be cool. A couple thousand acres up in the mountains of Pennsylvania, Maryland. Absolutely cool. So, I go through that phase of thinking about, what you would do and everything. And then, of course, then I kind of come back down to reality a little bit. And I think, well, hey, look, I got a big family. I have 6 children, 10 grandchildren. 5 of the 6 are married. So I really have 11 children, I guess you could say, and 10 grandchildren, plus a very big extended family. So there's all kinds of different ones I certainly could help out in that area, and some of them have some great business ideas. Again, chump change. I could handle that. So then I got to thinking some more, and I said, you know what? I'm going to call a friend of mine who's a reporter up in New York. I'm very well known in the New York press corps, and I've done that, actually over 10,000 interviews, but this particular reporter did feature stories on me in the New York Times and also in the American Banker and constantly in other papers, and she now works for the New York Post. So I gave her a call, and I knew she would get a big kick out of it because of all the people in the United States that this could happen to. This is absolutely crazy. And of course, when I told her, she just laughed because I had been railing against the banks for years about these non-sufficient funds fees policies and the fact that they've been some reform in that area, but there's still a long ways to go into that area. But anyway, she says, she just laughed and she says, I'm going to go to the editors and she says, and I'll get back to you, and I said, she says, I'm sure they're going to want to run this. And so anyway, long story short, there's some things happened in between that I'll touch on here at the end. But she called me back the next day, and when she called me, they did in fact run it. But I did in the between, that's where I want to back up here a little bit. In between, I did call the bank. After I talked to the New York Press, I went and talked to the bank and called them and told them about the situation and read them the amount. Well, they really didn't think much of it. They said, well, what we'll do is we'll take the information and pass it up the chain, and somebody will call you, like the branch manager or somebody. And I said, okay, I'll wait to hear from you. No problem. So that was kind of the end of it with the bank at that point, although, again, they come back into the story. So anyway, sure enough, she calls me the next day, whammo, she said, running it tomorrow. We got to run it tomorrow. And so, as I've always experienced, that does trigger other news coverage, and it did. I mean, it was up and down, particularly the East Coast, billionaire, sudden billionaire. In fact, what was really crazy about it is, of all the thousands and thousands of interviews I've done, there's only been a few times when I've been in a story that has been above what they call the fold in the paper. And the highest value real estate in a newspaper, of course we don't use much of these anymore, is on the right side of the paper. So anyway, it showed up, I mean, all over in my local area here, the Fort Myers area. Now I live in Punta Gorda, which is north of Fort Myers, but I mean, this is the front page of the paper the next day, and right here it is. I mean, I bested even the Trump story. So that's about as good as it gets. In my hometown paper, same thing, above the fold. former local man here becomes a billionaire, and they were real proud of that. And my parents were, because they still live up in that area, which is kind of interesting because when that got around up there and everybody saw it, someone came up to my mother in church and told her, said, "Do you know about your son? I mean, his massive sudden wealth, billions of dollars." And she didn't know anything about it. She's 83, and she said, "Well, oh my goodness." She says, "Well, I just hope he doesn't forget about me." Well, no and never, and she knows that. And I assured her about that later. But as the news spread, of course, you get relatives crawling out of the woodworks. Some of them were legit, some were not. Other people, there was a fellow from went to grade school with me. He reminded me that he'd loaned me $20 at some point. In grade school in the 60s, I mean, $20, that was a week's wage sometimes for some people. So anyway, all that kind of, happened, and the media frenzy went on. But anyway, it was just a lot of fun. All these business stories I'd done over the years, this was the first time that I had ever done a story that was just pure fun. Now, let me just talk about the bank a little bit. Okay, so I had called the bank. Well, when I had gone the next day, between the time it ran in the newspapers, I had gone to my SCORE meeting. Now, since I was on a sabbatical or sort of retirement for a couple of years, I volunteer for SCORE, which helps small businesses. I was a certified mentor with them, which means we go out in the community and we work with businesses to help them succeed, to give them free consulting. We do all kinds of other events like Shark Tanks and job fairs and regular business seminars on a particular subject. We do all that. Well, anyway, my branch manager showed up at the meeting that day. And now this is the day that they called me to say they were going to run it in the media. And I thought she was there. I had been after her for months to come to our meetings because I wanted to work with their bank. Banks typically will work with SCORE. It's part of the SBA, so we help local businesses even apply for what they call SBA loans. So anyway, she made her little presentation there. We went around the room, and about 30, 40 of us in our chapter. And then she got up, really surprised me that she showed up. And I thought maybe she was there about the 9.9 billion. She knew nothing about it. And when she finished her little presentation, I said, "Hey, before you leave, I got to tell you this." And so I told her, and she was totally perplexed, had no idea about it or anything. She said, "Oh, I'm going to check this out." So anyway, I said, and by the way, I said, you might get a call from the news media, because I had talked to them about it, and I just wanted to give you that heads up. So no problem. And so anyway, like I say, it went through and it got into the to the newspapers. But the other side of it is and this is what I don't understand, when the news media did contact the bank about this guy getting $9.9 billion in his bank account, their response was no comment. That's what they told all the reporters. The fact here, Fort Myers, the NBC station came up, we did a interview, and they kept promoting it in prime time. Like I say, everybody knew about it. But anyway, the thing was that I ended up to where they said no comment, and then later on, I did get, I'd gotten my chairman of my SCORE chapter, and I'm hoping not confusing you here a little bit. The chairman of my SCORE chapter came to me a couple of days after all this ran, and he said, "I got to tell you something." He said, that bank called the neighboring chapter up in Sarasota to let them know that they were reconsidering their $5,000 commitment to support their organization. We were just trying to get one set up here with the bank. And there was no reason why. And nowhere in the articles did it mention anything in my interviews about SCORE. So I guess the branch manager, she knew I was involved with them. And somehow they were not only no comment, but it was like we're going to, sort of retaliate here. It didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And so anyway, I reached out. I got a letter from the executive vice president of the bank, and he explained that it was a printer error, and it was it, and that it. So I went back to him, and I just wanted to get a little more clarification, like how exactly. I mean, I work for banks for many years. I mean, how would something like that happen with that exact number? Because that was 1/3 of the bank's assets. And he didn't respond to that, and then so I finally ended up responding to him and just said, hey, look, why don't you do this? Why don't you fund all the chapters that are in the communities that you serve in Florida at the level of $5,000? That would be a good thing. I would even volunteer to come over there and help manage it. In fact, it was pretty obvious they could use my input on how to handle the news media, because this was a fun story. They could have had a lot of fun with it too, but to come across, no comment. And the real thing I never followed up. In fact, I'm telling you this for the first time. I mentioned it on the blog because after the news story, I didn't go back and tell the reporters about this retaliation stuff, but they indicated, the executive vice president said, and we're not going to refund your fee. I mean, and I had people saying they should be doing all kinds of stuff for you, but anyway. So that was kind of a dark side to this fun story. But the whole thing is, let's go down, and I just want to share 6 tips with you. If this ever happens to you, let me pull out the little pointer here. Let's go through them here. I hope you can see them, 6 of them. Number 1, you get that kind of notice, get a beer. Wine, ganja, whatever can get you mellowed out. And so you can start thinking about it, and it's shut up. I mean, fortunately, I'm a widower, so I didn't have a wife that if I told her, I mean, who knows? She might already been shopping, who knows? But don't tell anybody. Just, kind of chill on it for yourself and do your fantasizing. What would you do with that kind of money? And then, of course, think about what you could do for the family. I can say I'm going down the line. And then maybe what you could do for humanity. Another big one. And then, of course, then call the bank. So anyway, it was a fun story. I'm glad that you tuned in here and were able to share it with you. Again, I'm running a little longer than I wanted to. There's a lot more on the blog and the podcast. So do that. A lot more information. I fill in more details about that dark side. And there's even another really funny part about the story, and I'll just tease it with 2 words: butterballs. So go and check out the blog or listen to the pod. Excuse me. Well, anyway. All right. Well, that's it. I hope again that you learned something here today and maybe put a smile on your face. Remember, we have the website, the blog, and Twitter. It's cardworthy.com. That's the epicenter. We're on the blog. It's just called Professor Cardworthy's Corner is the blog where it's updated. We have several stories there now. Also, the podcast is Professor Cardworthy Money Explainer, and you can get that on it's almost on all the podcast services now. And then, of course, also become a friend of Cardworthy. We, as we explain on site and on the podcast, and as I explained in Meet the Professor, we do need some donations to take up we've made some huge investments in the last 18 months, not just in this program, but in the related new websites that we've come up with. So please check that out. Become a friend. We have a GoFundMe account. You can go to GoFundMe, just type in Cardworthy, Professor Cardworthy, it'll pop up. And it'll give you all the details and give you a little more information, not only about me, but also why we can use some donations. It's not a great deal of money that we need. So, and just remember too that this is all edited, one shot, one cut, no extra stuff. But that's going to be changing over the next couple of weeks, thanks to your support, and we'll be able to get make the show more of a production like we did in the previous series back in 2007. So it all comes down, are you cardworthy? Well, If you are, again, that's a wonderful thing. If you're not, keep coming back. Go to the pod, go to the blog, come back to YouTube here, because all of my students eventually will become Cardworthy. So I hope you enjoyed the show very much, and I hope it did put a smile on your face. So I'm Professor Cardworthy, and let me find my little board here, and we'll close the program out, and you have a good day.